Hello, Booktopians, and welcome to another installment of Booktopia TV Live. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the new book, Dr. Karl's Surfing Safari Through Science, and who better to talk about it with than Dr. Karl himself. Hi, Karl. Welcome to Booktopia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark. Thank you.
Now, while we're talking, we are also very interested in hearing your questions. So, if you have any questions for Karl about science or about the book, or anything that you'd like to ask Karl, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and we'll get to them at the end. So, Karl, to kick off with, we've been asking all of the authors that we talked to this year, what has 2020 been like for you, and what has it been like to publish a book in this unique 2020 set of circumstances?
What's 2020 been like? Well, the numbers on the John Hopkins dashboard are brutal with regard to COVID-19. About 46 million people infected and about 1.2 million people dead. We're going through the second wave in some parts of the world. We're very lucky in Australia. So in Australia, on August this year, what we had was 500 new cases in Victoria, while the United Kingdom had 700. In the last few days of October, a few days ago, Victoria had no new cases. The United Kingdom had 20,000 each day. And of those 20,000, 200 will die. They didn't have to die. They're going to die. And so on one hand, I'm very lucky, like you, to be living in Australia. And I'm okay because I've got an income. But what about the people who do not have an income, like the baristas who are living hand to mouth, the gig economy, etc., etc.? They're doing it really hard, and the universities are doing it hard. So my position might change at the end of the year when my contract runs out. But at the moment, I've got a job. For some weird reason, the federal government, each time a university has applied to get JobKeeper, to keep the jobs going, has changed the rules specific. It appears almost specifically so that universities can't apply. And this has happened 3 times. And now, no matter what the universities do, they can't get JobKeeper. And I don't want to think that this is malicious or malevolent or deliberate, but I can't think of any other reason why they did this. So for me, I'm alive, and I don't know anybody personally who's been infected. Whereas when we had the bushfires early this year, I knew 8 people who couldn't get to their homes or had to abandon their homes. So how about you, Dr. Mark? What about you with bushfires? How many people? You with COVID? How many people?
I'm fortunate in that I've not known anybody who's been infected by COVID. I do know
Hooray!
one family that was affected by the bushfires, which was awful.
Yeah, so we both share the same experience because the bushfires had more of an effect on the general Australian population than did the COVID-19. And basically, all we've got to do is hang in there. And if you've got an income, that's good. And if you don't, I'm really sorry. And around middle, early next year to 2021, we'll get a vaccine. It won't be the best vaccine. After all, you go to war with the army you've got, not the army you want. And what we would like is something like the measles vaccine. You take it once, you never have to take it again, and the side effects are like 1 in a million or something. We'll be going with a vaccine you'll probably have to take every year, and the side effects might be 1 in 50,000. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm looking at the odds of 1 in 50,000 side effects from the vaccine, or 1 in 100 from dying or being left with long COVID, I'm taking the vaccine every time.
Yep. That sounds like a better risk.
Yeah, well, at least I have some control over my destiny, and I can pick the odds in my favour. Yeah. So, next comment or question?
Let's try and lighten it a bit. So last year you went on a random road trip through science, and this year you're on a surfing safari through science. So what's been the transition from the road trip to the safari?
Well, on one hand, the road trip was, I was thinking, look, there's just so much stuff in that book. It's got holograms as well, that, it's just sort of random. You go here, you go there, and, that's what a road trip is. This time I suddenly realized that science is not a bunch of facts. That's an encyclopedia. Science is a sort of a vague, wispy thing you can't really define, but it's a process to try to understand what's happening in the universe around you. So if you think about science or love or a flame or a wave in the ocean, you can't capture that wave and put it in a bottle and then study it, but it's real. And so I sort of got hung up on that thing about science and a wave are both living processes. And so I then had to then make up a whole bunch of metaphors to try and surf through the wave of science, etc., etc. And it's been a lot of fun. So I have tried surfing. I'm not particularly good at it. So that's the reason I called it Surfing Trip Through Safari, because it's sort of like a vague, wispy thing. Actually, as an example of a vague, wispy thing, one of the strengths, not weaknesses, strengths of science is that sometimes they change what they said. And people say, what? We can't trust them. No, the exact opposite. You can trust them, because if the data changes, you can rely on the scientists to turn around and tell you the truth. And so early in the year, we really did not have much knowledge about wearing masks. And we sort of wore masks, but nobody had done any hard science on it. And we all sort of accepted it was better than not. And only by doing, and I was really, yes, no, maybe at the beginning of the year. But once the data started coming in, I changed my opinion. And the data now says that if you're infected, you don't know it, but you're infected. And if you wear a mask, if you go out in public wearing a mask, the number of people you infect goes way, way down. But look at it the other way. If there's somebody around you and they're not wearing a mask, and then you are wearing a mask, it improves your odds a bit, not a huge amount, but definitely better than not wearing a mask. And the weird thing is that this has turned into a political issue. So in the United States, if you belong to this political party, you wear a mask. And if you belong to that political party, you won't wear a mask, but the science is exactly the same, which is it's better off for you. And that's kind of like thinking about the 12 times tables that we all had to learn in primary school. And it's like saying, well, look, I'm okay with the 2 and the 3 and the 4 and the 6 and the 8 times tables, but I am not okay with the 7 times tables, because I belong to the Calathumpian political party, and I do not accept that 7 by 2 is 14. 6 by 2, 12, I'm fine with that. 8 by 2, 16, yes. 7 by 2, 14, no, I do not accept that. I do not accept that mathematics. And that's what people are saying. And you see it also with climate change. They've got this weird position where the United Kingdom and Australia are completely opposite. In Australia, the Conservative Party does not accept the science of climate change, and the non-Conservative Party does. And in England, the United Kingdom, it's the other way around. The Conservative Party accepts the science of climate change, and the non-Conservative Party does not. Totally irrational. Like we established back in 1990 that global warming is real. It's happened before, but we created this episode, and we created it. It is happening now, and we made it happen. It's locked in. It's like trying to deny that the Earth is a globe. Whoops.
If I could ask a big question.
Anything. That's my job. Lay it on me, man.
Well, what do you think is the path forward in terms of depoliticizing some of these scientific issues?
It's hard. Did you see the video on Netflix, the movie called The Social Dilemma?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. Here's how it works. For those of you who have not watched it, I'll summarize one bit of it for you. Each time you click on a web page, in that act of clicking, all of your details, about 3 to 14 gigabytes, are offered up for auction to about 500 advertisers, who then will bid between 1 and 5 cents for the right to show you the next 20 ads on the next page you go to. And that whole auction happens in about 100th of a second. And by the time you go onto the next web page and it's downloading, you've already been sold. So the motivation of the social media is to keep you clicking. So in the case of Facebook, in their last quarter of 2018, out of about, I think, $18.6 billion, they made 18.3 out of advertising. And with Google, out of about 36 point something billion dollars. You're thinking, oh, well, they provide professional services and Android phones. Out of 36 billion in that last quarter, they made 32 billion out of advertising. So basically, they just want you to click. And you think that you're in charge of what you're doing, so you put there you go, you got your phone and you look at it and you think, I know what I'm doing. And then suddenly on the other side, there's not just a person. There's several hundred people who are using artificial intelligence to program buildings full of computers who say, you're 27 and single, and your marital state, it used to be in a relationship, then it went to single, now it's sort of like it's complicated, and you like smoked salmon, and all of that says that you would like a video on cats. And they put one up at the bottom of the screen, and you go, oh my God, and you click on it, and you have earned for them 1 to 5 cents. That, getting back to the lies, the AI has realized that most of us, if we're confronted with a little thing that says, scientists have discovered that the earth is flat, you go, oh, nah, rubbish. And you click on it and you find out there's rubbish, but it doesn't matter. They got their 1 to 5 cents out of you. So that's part of the disinformation campaign. And we've got the people who are so powerful, Google and Facebook, they're basically killing investigative journalism. Maybe the price is too high.
Oh, are we allowed to say this on Facebook? Will the stream get cut all of a sudden?
Are they killing? Yeah, because you see, for investigative journalism, what happens is that you're working at a newspaper, New York Times, and your editor says, look, Mark, we got this story. We're taking you off everything. Go and spend 3 months on it. Right? And they don't have the advertising revenue anymore. Right. And then you end up with a situation where if you wanted to get good news, you've got to pay for it. I pay $15 a month for the New York Times, but the overwhelming majority of the people coming through now in the next generation get their news off the sidebar on Facebook, Google, whatever. And so my daughter came to me at one time and said, hey, Daddy, what's this about this headline? And I thought, oh, that's not right. And so I went checking it out. And so what happened was that the scientists had done all these studies on Antarctica, and what they'd found was that the temperature in Antarctica was warming, and Antarctica is huge, about twice the size of Australia. But there was one little valley where the temperature was warming, and they had a theory, and they said, look, we think this is what is going on. We're not 100% correct, though. But it was an area like the size of Sydney to Wollongong out of twice the size of Australia. And they had a pretty good theory. They said, look, we're still working on it. The headline was, you can guess it came from the Murdoch media, the headline was something like, Antarctica warming, ! Scientists confused, ! Global ice age coming, ? Now you click on that because you think, wow, that's interesting. And it turns out to be a complete lie. But you have generated 1 to 5 cents in advertising revenue for Facebook or Google. So that's how the lies go out.
Now, before we move on, I wanted to ask, you have a Dr. Karl app.
Yes, correct. It's very modest of me. I'll show you. It looks like a light bulb. So you go into your phone, you go into your so-called app store, and here it is. I'll just show it up to the camera. It kind of looks, whoa, that yellow one. That's my wife and I. That's a yellow one at the bottom right. And then you click on it, and then you end up on what they call a landing page. And this gives you a hologram, almost as good, but not quite, as a hologram of Princess Leia in Star Wars, where she says, you are my only salvation, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you must help me. So you get this app and see it looks like this. So you activate your camera, you turn the sound up, you gotta have the sound on, and then you aim it at the front cover of the book. Let's just see if we can make this happen. Here we go, and
G'day, I'm Dr. Karl, and welcome to Hologram Me. And you'll find more lovely little hologram me's inside the book on each of the couple of dozen cover pages. There's so much stuff in there, it's like a book within a book. You'll find out about vegan diets, sand, 5G and black holes. And if you look down there, below my feet, you'll find a couple of what we techno people call hotspots or buttons. Press them.
Anyway, so that's how it works. And then if you go to the story about dead fish can swim, you look at the page and say, what? Can fish swim when they're dead? Yes, not only can fish swim when they're dead, whales have been noticed in the last century, when we killed whales, to be able to swim for days after they were now killed and dead, providing there was a strong oncoming sea. And they would swim into that sea at about 1 knot. So I give all the explanation, blah, 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 blah. And then when you do the app thing and you aim the camera, you see the little hologram me, and then you click on one of the buttons, and there in front of you, floating in space, is the video of a dead fish swimming upstream. Who would have thought such a thing?
Yeah, it's really cool. More books should have apps. It's great. So how do you go about selecting which subjects and which topics and which facts you're going to include in each book?
Well, I go by the fact that I am easily amused and easily bored, and I have a short attention span. So I go for whatever interests me. And when somebody said to me in the School of Physics, "Hey, Carl, did you know that dead fish can swim?" I said, "Really? Tell me more." And they told me more. And I said, "Show me the video." I said, "Okay." And that had to be in there. And then now another one was about coffee. We've been making coffee for about 6 centuries. And I read this paper, which had taken 5 years. Here we go. I'd written this paper, which took them 5 years to write, with people called computational chemists. Turns out to be a chemist who uses mathematics to work out what's going to happen, and a barista from Melbourne, obviously wearing black, obviously. And they spent 5 years, and they were able to solve the problem. Now, I respect anybody who has a trade and is good at it. You know, so mate, without plumbing, there is no civilization. And so I was talking to some of my barista mates, and they said, you know, I've been in these international competitions, and when they tell us to make 4 cups of coffee exactly the same, so each of the 4 judges can taste it, he said, nobody can. I said, what do you mean? He said, we can't do it. And I was alerted to this about 5 years ago, and blow me down after 5 years, by coincidence, they started the research back then. And the reason you can't make a consistent cup of coffee is because of clumping, and because we know this, we now know how to make a perfect cup of coffee. So this is how it works, right? So you've got your coffee cup underneath, holding the coffee beans all ground underneath the espresso machine. And what's supposed to happen is water, hot water under pressure, is supposed to come down and visit just for a little while each grain of coffee and take just some of the chemicals. There's about 2,000. You don't want all of them. You just want some of them. And then keep on going, being fair and democratic and giving an equal visit to each grain of coffee, and then coming out of the bottom, and then this beautiful black liquid comes out and you go, heaven on a stick, right? It doesn't happen. What happens is you get clumping. What is clumping? So imagine you've got the cup this big, where the hot water comes through. Well, you get these things maybe that round in real life, about this big, maybe the size of a marble, a centimetre across, where just the coffee powder just sort of goes clump and becomes like a solid lump. And it's so solid that the hot water, even though it's under pressure, cannot penetrate. No coffee goodness is extracted from any of those coffee grains, but there's a channel around the outside of it, and lots of coffee goodness and unfortunately badness is extracted from those channels. And the cure is remarkably simple, although it took them 5 years. Number 1, use less coffee. Number 2, slightly lower pressure. Number 3, don't grind it as fine, because that'll make it clump. And I thought, wow, really? I thought that the more fine you ground it, the more surface area you get, so you can extract more goodness. But they were saying, no, the exact opposite. And blow me down, I did that. And now at home, on my little atomic coffee machine, I'm now getting more consistent coffee. Happiness.
Excellent. Now, I'm about to ask a couple of questions about some specific things from the book, but I just want to throw it out to the audience as well and just remind you.
Oh, look at the audience.
Yeah, if you've got a question for Dr. Karl, please feel free to jump in and ask, and we'll get...
Hang on. I'll answer one question, which is really easy. Adrian Kaiser says, do I do my own indie research? No, the only research I've done is on testing the fatigue life of steels when I was a physicist, on designing and building a machine to pick up electrical signals off the human retina to diagnose certain types of eye diseases for Fred Hollows when I was doing my engineering degree. And then after, when I became a medical doctor, I did research into belly button fluff. And do I follow indoctrinated taught dogma? No, because science is not dogma. It's always changing as we learn more. So we used to think that the universe was created, it had always been there, and it was always just adding more atoms. And then we went to the Big Bang, and we got 4 pieces of evidence for believing the Big Bang. But the motto of the scientist is this: I hold my theories on the tips of my fingers, so the merest breath of fact will blow them away. And so when you talk to a cosmologist, you say, why do you accept the Big Bang? They say, because of all this data. And they said, well, what happens if you get different data that contradicts it? They say, out the door. So there's no dogma. It's whatever the latest data is, we go with that. Okay, anyway, as you're saying, Dr. Mark?
Excellent. All right. So yeah, any questions for Dr. Karl, pop them in the comments and we'll get to them. So first up, I wanted to ask a question about a specific chapter on murder hornets, which is something that has been in the news a lot this year. Can you tell us, what is a murder hornet?
It's the largest hornet in the world, about, compared to my face, maybe this big. That's a big bugger, right?
That is a big hornet.
They kill maybe a couple of dozen a year on average, a couple of dozen humans, although in some years they might kill more. In China, they're in Asia. It's called the Japanese hornet or the giant Asian hornet. In China, they reckon if you've been stung, maybe 10 times, bit of a shame. If you've been stung more than 30 times, go to a hospital. Your chances of dying are pretty high. So 1 will really hurt, but it won't kill you. 10 will really hurt, might make you sick. 30, mate, go to the hospital straight away. But they don't kill that many people. It's only like a couple of dozen or so. And the reason that they're called a murder hornet is because of the media trying to ramp it up. So if you look up the word for it in Japanese, in any of the Chinese languages, it's called a killer hornet, which is quite different from murder. Murder implies premeditation. I see somebody over there, I'm going to sneak up on them and kill them. Like you call it, like the killer shark. You don't call it the murder shark. It's not the saying, now I know that Mark goes for a swim 7:20 3 days a week. So, okay, guys, let's get ready for him. It's just, it's random, right? So it is the media hyping it up, and they are heading across the USA from the top left-hand corner, and they like sort of forested areas a bit above sea level. So in Australia, it'd be more like the medium altitudes on the Great Dividing Range, not too hot. That's why we've got to have good biosecurity.
Well, here's another question on that. I read in the book that you say that the hornets can travel up to 100 kilometers in a day. So how did they get across from Japan and Asian countries to the United States, where we're hearing about them now?
We're not 100% sure, and that's the mark of a scientist to admit that, but we're pretty confident that at least one lot came in a shipping container because we found debris behind, indicating that they've been there hiding away, and we're guessing that that's how they came. Flying all the way across, well, they're not as good as spiders, which can fly for 1,000 kilometers. They'd pretty well run out of juice because they're kind of like a helicopter. Like, think about an aeroplane. You look at an aeroplane, you think, oh, isn't it beautiful? And you look at a helicopter, and it's just brutal. Like a helicopter doesn't fly through the air, it just brutally attacks the air until the air gives up. And you could say that it's so ugly that the earth just throws it up in repulsion, and that's how they fly. I'm being a bit unfair.
So another question while we're on the Hornets, something that struck me was the grotesque manner in which they attack bees. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
They could sting them with their stings that the murder hornet has, and it's a smooth sting. It's not barbed, so they can just go in and out, and kill a lot. But that would take too long, so they just use their pincers and chop their heads off in large numbers, one a second or more, or even faster. And so you've got a beehive of a couple of thousand bees, but when the murder hornets do it properly, well, here's when they do it not properly. When they do it not properly, a single hornet comes up and says, "Oh, look, something over there," and the bees on guard will come out and say, "I see you. I know what you're doing. Piss off. Go away." But if they don't have that happen to them, they'll go away and then come back with 50 of their mates. And in about an hour, they can pretty well kill most of the bees, thousands of them, in 1 hour. And then they eat them and all that sort of stuff. Now, I know nature is bloody in tooth and claw. I'm sorry. I wish
Yeah,
it had a happy ending.
aren't the bees going through enough as it is at the moment?
We're being really mean to bees. Look, I just suddenly realised I was being such an amateur. I left my microphone down there instead of up here. I was just lifted up on my shirt. I am such an amateur, forgive me. And that's the mark of a scientist, to not cover up, but to say, I made a mistake. And maybe you can learn from it, to think, oh, where's the microphone? Yeah, I got it here on the shirt. Right, okay. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, bees are having a bad time. We've got to look after them. And they provide so much income for free. This is almost as bad as realising that the Great Barrier Reef or koalas are a great tourist draw for Australia, and then destroying them. Who would do such a silly thing? Not us.
While we're on bees, we've had a question from the audience related to honey. So,
Yeah.
So Marge asks, is Manuka honey the only honey to keep its antiseptic qualities when heated?
I don't know. What I've got to do is a story on Manuka honey. It is well known that most honeys have some degree of antimicrobial activity. Maybe bacteria, maybe viruses. I haven't studied that. I have to read up on it and then turn it into a story and then see if Manuka honey is really worth all the hype about it, and I don't know. And to give you that answer, which I can give you in 2 minutes, would take me about 10 hours of reading and then another 5 hours to turn it into a story. Okay, next book for you, Marge, Manuka honey coming up.
So something else that we're hearing a lot about at the moment is 5G, and you have a handy chapter in here called 5G Mania. What is 5G, and should we be worried about it?
5G kind of refers to the 5th generation of mobile phones. And in each case, we've gone from analog for 1G, and then 2, 3, and 4, and 5 have been digital. And in each case, we're gradually going to higher and higher frequencies. And this is a weak explanation, because you can stuff more up and downs in each second, you can transmit more data. And so ultimately, when we're going at the highest frequencies with 5G, we should be able to transmit up at 20 gigabits a second. Now, 5G comes in 3 versions. The poverty pack, or slow, as good as 4G or just a little bit better, and then finally the really good stuff. Nobody's bothering with the poverty pack, which is actually slower than 4G. Most countries around the world are going for the one that's about the same as 4G. There's a whole bunch of frequencies. They go from about 1.5 megahertz up to about, or gigahertz, sorry, from say from 0.8 of a gigahertz to about 2 or 3 or 4, or 2 or 3, which is about 4G, all the way up to 60. Nobody's doing 60. A few people are doing around 15, 20, and the trouble is that the range is so short that you've got to have a tower every 100 meters. But providing you're sort of drenched in the towers, you can get very high speeds, but it falls off really rapidly. So as we've gone from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, on average, the frequencies are getting higher. On average, the data rate is getting faster, and on average, the range is getting shorter. So with 2G, you could go 20 kilometres, and then 3G, 4G just drops down and down. It doesn't go that far. And in fact, 5G will barely penetrate your skin. And nobody's really using, a few people are using the slow version. In America, in say Chicago, there's a few blocks that have got the super fast stuff, but that's only up to 20 gigahertz. It's not the super fast 60 gigahertz, and it falls off really quickly. So that's the background to it. And the health aspect, nobody has ever proved that non-ionizing radiation can cause cancer. So we're talking here about, did you do chemistry at school, Dr. Mark?
I did it for a semester, and then I switched to drama. So
Do you know what atoms are?
yes.
Okay, so you know they've got a little central core. It's kind of like a P in the middle of the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. So you've got this central P that's really dense, and it's got 99.99% of the mass, and then lots of empty space. Okay, I know it's not empty, but let's just forget quantum for now. So you've got this central P, you've got this empty space, and then on the outside you've got electrons. Now there's electromagnetic radiation, and it varies in wavelength from much, much smaller than an atom to the size of the universe. Now here we go. If the wavelength is very short, if the frequency is very high, those two statements mean the same thing. The radiation can knock the electrons off an atom. So you've got an atom. If you can knock the electrons off an atom, that's called ionizing radiation, and we know it causes cancer. It's out there right now. It's all around us. It's called sunlight. And 3% of it is ultraviolet, and we know that it causes cancer, and Australia is the skin cancer capital of the entire known universe. So if you go and look at visible light, you got red up to blue and then violet. And then when you're at violet, you can shine violet light on your skin all day, every day for a year, nothing. Absolutely nothing. But go a little bit higher frequency or lower wavelength into ultraviolet, and you're into cancer territory. And up there at the high frequencies, the ultra high frequencies, you've got X-rays, which cause cancer, and gamma rays, which cause cancer. But going the other way, you're going down into lower frequencies, and even 5G at the highest frequency is about 1,000 times lower than the stuff that causes cancer. So non-ionizing radiation has never been proven to cause cancer. And we started off in the 80s with the big studies looking at power lines and microwaves, because they were doing microwave transmission for phone around Australia. And then we looked at TV and radio and 2G and 3G and 4G, and we've never shown that they cause cancer. And now we're into 5G. It's too early to tell. But interestingly, within 2 months of 5G being introduced only into America, and I think it was Korea, within 2 months, people were saying it's causing cancer and has caused forests to die all over the world. Complete lies. I'm sorry. So, mind you, there will be some sort of effects on biology. Like, I mean, eating an apple doesn't cause cancer, but it has an effect on your biology. And there will be some effects. But bad effects like cancer, no.
What is it that that you think about 5G has attracted such a level of conspiracy theories and negative publicity?
Ignorance. Because if you actually go into it, you see that there's no harm from it. And quite a few of my friends in the sciences have benefited from it by getting cheap housing. Because people think that the super high voltage power lines, the ones that are up there and, you got 500,000 volts, and there's this grass lawn, 100 metres wide running for kilometres in each direction. People think, oh my God, that's really dangerous. I can put a fluorescent light bulb out there and it'll light up. It must be dangerous. No. So many of my science mates have deliberately gone out of their way to buy some land backing on to an ultra high voltage power line. Number one, it's really cheap. Number two, you got this huge backyard, and the electricity people come and mow it for you. So all you have to do is put a fence in, a little gate in there, and you got yourself cheap accommodation.
And free lawn mowing. That's great.
And free lawn mowing as well, and fewer neighbours. What's
Yeah.
not to like?
Now, before we move on to the next question, I want to ask you.
Yeah, the audience, yes.
I've seen one come through. I wanted to ask it because we were talking about bees before, and Stephanie says, "I was taught that Australian bees don't have stingers. Is this right?"
There's many bees in Australia. There are imported bees, and those. Do you remember the names of them? Melliflora or something like that? Anyway, they have been bred in Europe over thousands of years to generate huge amounts of honey. The Australian bees don't make as much honey. Do they have stingers? I don't know. I'm sorry, I failed you. Straight don't know. They don't make as much honey, but on the other hand, they're more resistant to bugs around in the local area. And honestly, the bees are worth billions of dollars to the world agriculture. And we're being so bad to them, especially with the colony collapse disorder. If somebody knows the answer to that, or can you look it up on Wikipedia, can you give us an answer for Stephanie? So just put it in the question thing and Dr. Mark will go scrolling down to find the answer.
Absolutely. And yeah, if anybody has any more questions they want to ask, please drop them in the chat. I see we've got a few more that we'll get to in a moment. But firstly, I wanted to ask about another chapter in your book. So I'm a huge fan of science fiction, so I've read a lot about black holes, but they're always fictitious black holes, which may not necessarily behave the way normal black holes do, or real ones. Real ones always tend to get a bit confusing, and you have a chapter in your book called Black Holes Have No Size. Can you explain this in a way that somebody who kind of understands fictitious black holes would be able to wrap their head around?
Okay, so let's suppose that we have a star like our sun, about 1.5 million kilometres across. And it's the size that it is because of two forces. We're very lucky. There's a force outwards, which is the nuclear fires burning, and a force inwards, which is gravity, and gravity sucks. When the star, our sun, comes to the end of its life, it'll go through a bunch of stuff, and then the nuclear fires will go out and it'll shrink. And it'll shrink to the stage where the atoms, the electron clouds are all sort of getting awfully close to each other, jostling up against each other. It'll be about 1,000, it's 100 times, so it'll be 1,000,000 times smaller in volume. It'll be roughly the size of the Earth and 80% of its mass, and we call that thing a white dwarf. And basically the nuclear fires have gone out and it's just surviving on stored heat for trillions of years. Okay, stage one. So it collapses and the electrons are sort of jostling up. The electron clouds around the atoms are sort of jostling. This one's jostling to that one and so forth. Stage two. The star's a bit heavier. Maybe 3 or 4 times the mass of the sun. Things happen, it loses a bit of mass, the nuclear fires go out, and then it shrinks down to the size of the Earth, but it's still got more gravity. It's got a lot more gravity, and it keeps on shrinking down until the electrons, they actually mush into each other. So here's an atom, and here's another atom. Whoa! And the atoms actually mush into each other. And the electrons get forced into the protons. And suddenly you don't have this thing anymore where you've got a little p and lots of empty space, and then where the crowd sits at the MCG, you've got the electrons. Suddenly all you have is neutrons. It's more complicated than that. I'm doing a story on that. But basically that's a neutron star, and it's about 20 kilometres across. And it's about 3 times the mass of our sun. Next stage. Suppose it's 5 or 6 or 7 times the mass of our sun, or 8. Well, it goes through stuff, messy, loses some of its mass, shrinks down to the size of the Earth, sure, but it's got more mass, shrinks down to a neutron star 20 kilometres in diameter, but it's still got more gravity, and it keeps on shrinking until it shrinks all that mass to 0. Now, a black hole, now we'll just stop there, and now we'll go to the no-hair theorem. Have you heard about the no-hair theorem?
I've not heard about the no-hair theorem.
Astrophysicists, they're funny. Oh, God, they're funny. So this comes from a New Zealander called Richard Kerr. And black holes don't have any hair. They've only got they don't have a complicated stuff. They've got no hair. They've only got 3 properties. Now, look at me. I've got various properties. I've got auditory properties. You can hear my voice. I've got optical properties, so the light lands on me from my many lights, and some of it's absorbed, some of it's reflected, and it goes upon you. I have the property of mass. I have a property of volume. I've got some electricity in me. I have that as well. I've got dozens of properties. I don't have the property, though, of being the world heavyweight cage fighting mixed martial art champion. That is not one of my properties. Okay? Okay, now we go to the black hole. The black hole has three properties. It has mass, it has spin, and it has charge. That's it. Nothing else. No hair. No other fancy stuff. You'll notice that size is not one of its properties. So when it shrinks down, it goes down to 10,000 kilometres, 20 kilometres, 1 kilometre, a millimetre, a millionth of a metre, a trillionth of a metre, a trillionth, millionth, nothing. It's just a point in space. Now, there is a thing called the event horizon. And the event horizon is where the escape velocity is equal to the speed of light. And that's just a straight linear relationship. If our sun could be turned into a black hole, its event horizon would be 3 kilometres away, and then you just linear it up. 10 times heavier, 10 times the diameter of the event horizon, and you can go to billions of times. All black holes have the same size, which is 0. Now, I am so thrilled that you read science fiction. Do you read Alastair Reynolds?
I love Alastair Reynolds.
Oh, I love Alastair. Isn't he good? I love it. Oh, man, he's rocks. And have you got into some of the old stuff like Asimov or A.E. Van Vogt?
I've not read E. Van Vogt, but I am an Asimov fan.
Okay, so try A.E., initial A.E., then Van, V-A-N, V-O-G-T.
Yeah.
And he's kind of weird, but gee, he wrote some good stuff. And Heinlein's pretty good. Heinlein's a bit of a fascist, but he's got some great ideas. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I'm so glad that you read science fiction. Now, I might suggest that you just sleep on what I said and then let it soak into your consciousness, because I wrote my first story on black holes a couple of years ago, about 10 years ago, and the person who reviewed it is an expert on that, and he said, the black holes have got no size. I said, yeah, sure. I put it in a book, and it didn't really sink in. And then 10 years later, I did another story. I said, hey, what do you mean when you said that I shouldn't call this black hole bigger than the other one because black holes have got no size? He said, don't you remember what you wrote 10 years ago? No. It says over there, black holes have got no size. I said, did I say that? And there it is in black and white. So I'm very happy for you to not take it all on in one go. Let it sink in.
Okay. And I think I heard you interview Alastair Reynolds many years ago on Triple J, and that was a very exciting morning for me.
Oh, man, he's so exciting. I love his stuff.
Yeah. Now, in the comments, we have had an answer on the
question.
Julie,
an answer.
Yeah, Julie Smythe says Australia has over 1,700 species of native bees. Only
1,700?
1,700 species.
1,700?
Yep.
Okay, yep.
And only 11 of these species are stingless.
Ah.
So there are stingless Australian bees. So
that's 11 out of 17,000. That's 1 out of 170. That's about 0.5%, 2/3%. Okay, less than 1%. Right. Okay. Well, you learn something every day. And who was the one who looked up the answer for us?
That was Julie Smythe.
Thank you, Julie Smythe. We love you.
All right. Well, how about we get over to some audience questions now?
Yeah.
While we're answering these, if you have any more, please feel free to drop them in to the comments. So Melissa wants to know, how did hydrogen come from nothing at the beginning of the Big Bang?
We don't know what was there before the Big Bang. The Big Bang could have been a quantum event. So I've written a story on this. So look up ABC, Dr. Karl, and vacuum. And with a bit of like you might, and Casimir, Casimir. Now, Casimir was really smart. He was a physicist, but he worked in entertainment. He was the head of the Philips. Remember the electronics company called Philips in Europe? He was head of their entertainment division, and he invented the CD. He invented the audio cassette. And the reason that he made the audio cassette, the audio cassette the size it was because it was nice and convenient. You could just put it in your shirt pocket. And the reason that he made the CD bigger was because people were walking into record shops and stealing the CDs and putting them in their shirt pockets. So he made it just a little bit too big to fit in your shirt pocket. And he came up with the Casimir effect. Now imagine you've got a box. So this is talking about the universe coming from nothing and hydrogen atoms coming from nothing. So imagine you've got a box and it's made of metal, so no electromagnetic radiation can get into it. And it's completely empty. There's not a single atom, not an atom of anything. There's only the walls, but between the walls, there's nothing, man. It's just completely empty. Is that box empty? No. According to Casimir, it contains a bubbling sea of particles and antiparticles, which, under quantum land, and this is allowed, they wink into existence, a particle and an antiparticle, and then wink out again. And providing this happens for a short enough time, that's allowed. It's kind of like the teenage kids on Saturday night borrowing the parents' car, and providing they get it back soon enough, it never happened. The parents don't notice a single thing. So we're fairly confident that the Big Bang happened. What was there before it, we have no idea. When the Big Bang started, everything was very hot. And by about 3 minutes, it had cooled down enough so the nuclei, the core of hydrogen and helium atoms could form. And maybe a bit of other crap, like a tiny bit of fairy dust of, lithium and boron, But basically hydrogen and helium cores, not the whole thing. The electrons were just buzzing around everywhere. It took until 380,000 years, plus or minus, for the universe to cool down enough that the electrons could suddenly conglomerate around the nuclei. At 380,000 years, we had actual hydrogen atoms. That's where they came from. But what was there before? Nobody knows. It was exciting. Roger Penrose, who won a Nobel Prize this year, did say, look, I've been looking at the cosmic background radiation, and by doing a mathematical analysis, I'm pretty sure I have found an imprint of a previous universe. And everyone went looking and said, oh, no, you made a mistake. And he said, yeah, I made a mistake. Bummer.
Forgot to carry the one.
And divide by 2. I guess it was a 7 times tables, They always get you. They're not real.
Would it also be accurate to say, this is something that I believe I read once, or maybe I dreamed it, that if time began at the Big Bang, there was no before the Big Bang. If time
That's... Yeah. Only because we're accepting what Einstein said, and so far he's been proven right on just about everything. So in 1905, Einstein said that time is intimately married to the 3 space dimensions. Now, you've got the space dimensions of backwards and forwards, and left and right, and up and down, and then the time dimension at 1 second per second is not separate. It's married into it. And he sort of said that, but Einstein was brilliant, but he kind of sucked as a mathematician. But luckily, he worked with clever mathematicians. And in this case, Minkowski came along in 1908 and said, you know what, Einstein? You're bloody right. Good on you. So time began with the Big Bang, but, here's a big but. When the Big Bang started, there wasn't just the 4 dimensions. There were about 11 or 12. And some of them, 8 or 7 of them, went away, and we don't know where they are. We're pretty confident they used to be there, and maybe in the 21st century, in the same way that we will, I reckon, be able to make and manipulate black holes, we'll also be able to find some of these other dimensions. God knows what it'll be like when we've got tame black holes. It'll be probably the military who come up with it first as a weapon.
So we've got a kind of a change of tack here. Shay asks a question. She says, weird question for you, Dr. Karl. She's always wanted to know, how much does an average pair of human testicles weigh?
Just look up on Wikipedia. So what happens is that when you do your surgery term, you might be lucky enough to go into doing prostate work and male genital work. And then you carry around with you what looks like a set of prayer beads. No, they're not. And so they go from the smallest testicle to the largest testicle, and so you feel one, and you go, oh, yeah, that's right. And then you feel the other one, you go, yeah, that's right. And that's how you work out what it is. So I'd look that up in Wikipedia. I'm sure the answer is there. But anyway, just to know that there are these sort of things that look like prayer beads, and they're not.
All right, we've got a question from Warren. He says, with the outbreak of storms in southeast Queensland, we have had a plague of butterflies, perhaps moths. Can you shed any light on this?
Really? No, I do not know. And what we need is not just an entomologist who is an insect person, but a lepidopterist, a butterfly person. And I think somebody like Cameron Webb, who's very approachable and very knowledgeable. I think he's called Mozzie Guy on Twitter or something. He would know what's happening. There is a whole lot of stuff going on with insects in southeast Queensland that then migrate down to Victoria, and the bogong moth, and then being tricked by lights from Canberra and all sorts of stuff. I'm out of my depth on that one. I failed you. Sorry.
And a kind of a follow-up question from that, I guess, is does lightning enrich the soil?
Yes. What happens is that when lightning happens, you get two strokes, not just one. And then there's the little one that comes down, and it's carrying about 100 amps. It's about the diameter of your arm, and it stutters down in roughly 50 meters jumps, going tuk, 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 trying to find a low resistance pathway. And the bottom of the cloud is negative, the ground is positive, we don't know why. And when it gets close enough, the spark jumps from the ground. And luckily, at this stage, there's already a path being burned in the air. By the way, it comes down at about 100 kilometres a second. Our fastest spacecraft would do maybe 30 absolute tops a second, roughly the speed the Earth goes around the sun. And to get out of the Earth's gravity into orbit, you need only 7 or so kilometres a second. So, the upgoing bolt goes up, and it's carrying not just 100 amps, it's carrying thousands and tens of thousands, and it's about this big across, about the diameter of a human trunk, and it's travelling at about 100,000 kilometres a second. So you don't see it. You do see the one coming down, you see it go, and the one coming up, you just get this big flash. If you have an ultra high speed camera, military grade, you can actually go, one bit of it, another bit, and you can see it going up because it's moving at 1/3 the speed of light. It ruptures, it does things, it does chemistry, and it ruptures chemical bonds, and it joins oxygen to nitrogen. So you get oxides of nitrogen, and then some of them are soluble, and they go into the ground and they fertilize the soil.
So we've got a few more questions that have come through, and these are big questions. Kerry wants to know, do you think that humans, through the development of technology, have stopped evolving?
Oh, no. Yes. No, both are true. So 7,000 years ago in Hungary and 4,000 years ago in Africa, in a few places, there was a mutation such that an adult human was now able to break down the chemical called lactose, the twin sugars in milk. So a sugar means a different thing to a chemist or to a non-chemist. To a non-chemist, to a chemist, it means anything with about 5 or 6 atoms that forms a ring. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's fructose and glucose, and they can cross the gut wall by themselves. But if you've got two of them stuck together, they can't. They've got to be split. Lactose is one of them. It's in milk. Newborn babies and kids up to about 5 or 6 or 7 can make lactase, which breaks it down, then you lose it as an adult. So that mutation gave people a tremendous advantage. If you had a cow, you could either, option 1, kill it and get some meat off it. Option 2, make the cow eat grass. They love eating grass. They turn the grass into milk and muscle, and then you drink the milk, and at the end of a year, you've still got the cow. You've got as much nutrition as if you killed the cow, and the cow didn't compete with you for food resources, so it gave them a tremendous advantage. We've had similar mutations in blonde hair and blue eyes. So on one hand, we are still mutating. On the other hand, we are keeping people alive who would not have otherwise lived. So with cystic fibrosis, mate, you didn't get to be old enough to have kids. You and I, Mark, almost certainly have a 1 in 20 chance of carrying the gene for cystic fibrosis. In China, on the Pacific coast, close to 0. So by these people living and spreading their genes through society, we're increasing the percentage of it. I'm very fond with that. But we're also in the situation where we can change our own destiny. And we can modify ourselves that firstly, we switch off the death program called apoptosis in our cells so that we live forever. So the generation coming through now will be in the first generation to live forever, whereas I'll be in the last generation to die. I'm cool with that. And secondly, the proper shape for a human being, according to Freeman Dyson, in his book Disturb the Universe, the proper shape for a human being is a cloud of iron vapor weighing 50 kilograms, the diameter of a planet floating through space, and immortal. Yes, so evolution is complicated. Sorry about that long, involved answer.
Well, good. So the next question comes from Nick. He asks, going off the Big Bang chat, what do you think is the next great mystery of the universe that is still unsolved?
Oh, God. At the big scale, dark matter, very confident it exists. No idea what it is. Accounts for 25%, 20% of the mass of the universe. And dark energy, if you turn it back into mass, it's about 70% of the energy, the mass of the universe. We don't know what they are. And down at the small scale, we use a thing called the Standard Model. Look up on Wikipedia, have a day reading through that. Very interesting. And that describes all the subatomic particles, and it works just fine, except for the fact that it doesn't work. So it reckons that neutrinos should have 0 mass. They don't. But it still works in other things. There's something wrong, and we're at that stage now where something smells mistaken in the air, and when we fix it, we'll then have another revolution in science. So Becquerel got some uranium, and he put it on top of some photographic plates, and it made them fogged. And when we discovered why, that gave us quantum mechanics and electronics and smartphones and videos of cats.
I think we don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I think we've got time for one more question. So this is another big one. This comes from Christian. He asks, if Hawking's arrow of time changes direction, does the psychological arrow of time keep moving in the same direction? I.e., are we aware in forward sense that time has started moving backwards?
Don't know. So in the regular 3 space dimensions, you can go backwards, forwards. We don't know why time is one way. And hypothetically, let's just do a mind experiment. Suppose that time can go backwards. Would we be aware of it? I think I'd have to read more science fiction to give you that answer. That's too deep for me. I think I need to read some more Alastair Reynolds.
I think there was an episode of Red Dwarf about it.
There was one where they went backwards and forwards and things got juddery as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good point to leave it. Dr. Karl, thank you so much for spending the hour with us and answering our questions. We really appreciate your time.
Look, I'm happy to do another just pure Q&A one and answer questions. I love learning stuff that I don't know. Like, did you know that only 11 out of the 700 native species of bees in Australia don't have stings? I had no idea.
There you go. And Dr. Karl's Surfing Safari Through Science is available now at booktopia.com.au. And if you're watching this at the time that we're live, which is the 2nd of November, we do still have some signed copies in stock, but they will be selling fast. So if you're watching this later, they may not be there. But signed copies, Dr. Karl's Surfing Safari Through Science, available now. Thank you, everybody who tuned in, and thank you for watching, and thank you, Dr. Karl.
Thank you. And if there's more need for signed copies, yes, send around another 2/3 of a ton, and I'll spend 5 hours signing them. No worries at all.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I love doing it. I feel so honoured. Honestly, I was so honoured to be asked. Okay, see you later then, Dr. Markin. Look, thank you, lovely audience. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions. Ring into Triple J or go to my homepage, drkarl.com, and you'll see the various local radio stations I'm on around Australia. So you could ring into that as well. Bye.
Excellent. Bye. Thank you.